All right, Max. Got another one today. A fun one. Ba-ba-da-bum. We got Tetris by Box Brown. I can't believe I almost screwed up that title. That would be insane. What is this about? It's about Tetris and the making of the game. Super interesting book. This is a story not just about Tetris, but about the culture that produced it, the real intricate way it's spread globally, that involves a couple key countries, in particular the United States and Japan, I would say, as well as Russia, obviously, where it originates from. You see the tale from the original person that made the game, some of the key players in getting the business deals done, and overall, this book does a really cool job at just dissecting gaming in a historical fashion in general, in a really fun, interesting way. So, before diving into the scores, we'll run through it again. The new patented scoring system, and my patented always messing this part up, where I never know how to place it on the... I think I need a new notebook, too. This one's just a little... That's good enough. All right, characters. We'll start there. Characters, again, just to remind everybody, characters, art, history, culture, and the X Factor. These are the 1 out of 10 scores for how much I thought this was a strength of the work of art that makes me want to would make me want to come back to the work of the art later just to relive it. And the readability part is the friction, like how, if I want to come back and reread this, re-experience this, how easy versus difficult is it? So starting off with the characters, I give it a 5. I would say that this is there's a psychological principle which if you have a bunch of stuff, your brain will kind of automatically calculate the average of it. Like if you only had 2 characters and they're both really, really strong, that would actually be the memorable, strong part. But if you have 100 characters and some of them aren't that strong, even if you still had those 2 really strong characters, I think it brings it down a little bit. And this book does a great job capturing, I think, the history of actually this game coming to light, all the way from the Alexei, who's the creator of the game, through so many different business people and lawyers along the way. I'm not even going to try to touch base on every character here that comes across, but because there's just loads and loads of them, to like the judges making decisions about the cases and stuff. Aside from Alexei, the game's creator, there's like 2 other characters I can even remember after reading this book the second time. So I think that, again, is like a bit of a testament that it's just, there's a lot of people going on, not surprisingly, in an extremely popular game that gets globalized, but there's almost maybe, this is probably, again, just a bias of mine, there's almost too many for my brain to keep track of. You get the sense of the characters, and some of them do have like interesting depth, but very few of them go through like an arc. You don't feel incredibly personally connected to their winning or losing for most of them. It's like a historical, it's just going through the history of it. So so for what it's worth, I thought like some of them were very interesting, especially the game's creator and a few of the like people chasing the rights to distribute the game. But some of the other characters just very, I would say, forgettable in a sense, because they're kind of one-hit wonders, and then there's just a lot of them. So, in terms of the art, I've already showed a couple pages, but I think some of the really cool stuff about this book is like, I mean, just a ton of I think a lot of neat visuals. I give it a strong score overall. They also made this decision to basically make everything white, black, and yellow, which I kind of really like. It sometimes it still has that colorful, attractive element that makes things pop off the page. A simplistic kind of style too, but yeah, like I think it actually had a kind of strong, again, above average, I think, overall, or definitely not a weakness, was the art. I think some interesting stuff there. Is it the most intricate, or were there particular looks that I like, particular pages that just like sit in my mind? Not exactly either, but I do think that yellow, black, white thing is pretty distinctive, actually, and pretty interesting. So I thought a strong score there. Overall, the strongest score I gave in this book was for the history and culture, because this book does a lot, like that I think is also quite interesting, though, again, the X Factor later. But so an interesting part. So I was born at the later part of the 80s, and this book basically takes place in the mid to late 80s. So some of this is like just interesting to think about, being like right around when I was born, like all this interesting stuff about gaming and things happening. So a part of this is like I just thought it was an interesting personal thing for my own life, but you take for granted how maybe interconnected the world is. Like there's very few pockets of the world right now that are difficult to get information very easily, but back then during the Cold War, like Russia was a mystery. So Tetris in some sense was this really interesting sort of breakout where Americans got to experience what was happening behind the Iron Curtain in like a fun kind of way, for not exactly the first time, but one of the first times. Really cool, again, history of like modern technology and computing. Like the way that Tetris got made was all using, like they didn't have the concept of like images and video and stuff like that at the time. Everything was just text based. So he had to figure out how to make this game basically just using text characters, which is again just like a fun flashback. And then one of the really cool elements of this story, and I'm biased in liking this kind of thing in general, but everything is, this is a hedgehog type of a book. And when I say that, there's this classic analogy of like grouping people into foxes or hedgehogs, where foxes sort of are all over the place and updating their priors. Hedgehogs more have like a core idea and they just run with it. And the core idea of this book is that everything is a game. Like basically gaming itself is like fundamental to human life. Like some of the earliest cave drawings were of like Olympic style games, wrestling. Some of the earliest some early hieroglyphics in Egypt showed playing basic games around the table as a way of connecting. And so like I'm a hedgehoggy type of guy in general. I think I love like taking an idea and following it down, but you get this really cool history of gaming that contextualizes how Tetris fits into this story. That's a very human story too. So I think that's also a really strong element to this book. Just share a couple more of these. Like I think this highlights some of the cool artworks too. You also see like the original, this is like some of the original story of how Nintendo got founded in Japan, which was like fascinating too. Like I had no idea about some of this stuff on my first read. And then some back and forths again with just like how this got distributed and some of the meetings and people involved, blah blah blah. So yeah, hopefully that paints a bit of why I think the history culture is really relevant. I think that story of gaming, seeing lots of parts of Russian culture that was essentially hidden from most of the West on the outside, as well as some elements of Japanese culture as well, such as Nintendo founding. I think all of it just plays together in a strong history cultural sense. In terms of the readability, so I've read this I've read this book twice now, and I think that it is not a hard book to read artistically. Like I think the art is strong. Again, it's many pages don't have that much text going on. Where I think why it probably took me a couple days to reread the whole thing, even though it's only 250 pages basically, is that it's that mix of not that I don't care about the characters, but since it's a historical telling, there feels like there's no tension. You kind of a lot of what is going to ultimately happen. You just don't know exactly, again, who's going to get some of the contracts or whatever. So you don't invest in the characters overly much, I think. And that's obviously a big part of what makes stories propel storytelling, I think, along, is caring and feeling investment. I think the other part is just that, there are so many different names and legal jargon things thrown around. It's not. I think it tries to make this as easy to follow in some sense as possible, but maybe there's almost a few too many details about the specific players and minutia. So again, I thought it was a bunch of great elements overall, but I think it is a little bit of like. I could imagine rereading this again sometime in the future, maybe a couple years from now, to like go over the gaming part again. Like I think that's a really strength of this book, but I do think it's one of those things where it wouldn't necessarily be like a walk in the park. It would take like more than one sitting to probably read the whole thing. And then finally, the X Factor score. I thought this was pretty strong, partially because of I really think the gaming thing for me just made it such a cool through line, like that human storytelling aspect of us as game playing creatures, or like, phrasing everything as a game was very unique. I thought the artwork again was kind of had its own unique vibe, even if I didn't think it was the most beautiful. I thought the use of color and visuals was kind of distinct as well. And without spoiling anything, there are a couple like interesting parts at the end of the story as well, which again adds to the X factor a little bit in my head. So again, a strong score there as well. Definitely they take more risks. They do interesting things in this book. They have a lens for telling it that I thought that not everybody has taken. So overall, an exact 6 out of 10 score, very very solid for Tetris by Box Brown. Definitely would suggest trying to give it a read, and yeah, see you next time.